Hey everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Blind Banter podcast. I'm joined with my co-host as always, Carlos. Hey Carlos, how are you doing?
Pretty good tonight, Lorne. Thanks for having me. I'm doing pretty well, and I'm hoping you are too. Now, we're going to open this up with an argument that Lorne had that he really wants to tell me about, and that I really want to know about because he didn't want to reveal it before the podcast. I guess he wants it to be a surprise. So
Yes.
Take it away, Lorne.
Okay. So the guy opened up with he has a visual impairment that he said there's a good possibility that eventually it will get worse, but it's been stable for 6 years.
Yep.
He is going to be stuck into an arranged marriage, and he wanted to know if he should tell his soon-to-be significant other about the visual impairment, or because it's been stable for 6 years, that he shouldn't have to because, well, it doesn't matter either way because she's still going to marry him. And when I had given my 2 cents and said that I believe that transparency is absolutely key, and it's probably a good idea just in case it does get worse to go ahead and tell her, he goes, well, even if it's an arranged marriage, she really has no choice if she likes it or not. Now, the question I have for you, Carlos, should he tell her or should he keep it secret?
Well, it is an arranged marriage, right? I don't know where arranged marriages happen, but like, to me, that makes a difference in the sense that it doesn't really matter if he tells her or not. Like, I agree with you on the fact that you should be transparent, right? But this is an arranged marriage. This is not a marriage where, she's going to go, well, I'm not interested anymore, or I am interested. Now, I would reveal it because what if one day he wakes up and, like, he's having issues and, like, he has to explain the whole thing right then and there. Like, that's kind of a pain in the ass, But I don't necessarily regard it as essential, but I do think it is something you should do out of decency, if you will.
Yeah, like I fully feel that you should be 100% transparent because you don't know necessarily what her background is or who her family members is. For example, my wife's mother works in
an eye doctor.
Works in eye surgery, right? So she was able to get me into specialists that would have taken me years to even just find out about, let alone actually go and see. So being somewhat transparent was definitely something that's positive. But in my opinion, no matter what, I still think that he should tell her because you don't really want to start off any type of relationship with lies or secrets of that nature, just in case it does get worse. And she goes, okay, well, it literally you're blindsiding her at that point. Which
I mean, I feel like I don't have enough understanding of like the dynamics of an arranged marriage, right? Because that to me seems so foreign, and like the concept, I just can't grasp it, right? It's like if you talk to me about seeing out of my knee. Like it just doesn't really make sense to me, and I feel like that's one thing where like I agree with you that you should start a relationship with transparency, but to me the idea of an arranged marriage, like for both sides, seems pretty messed up. Like people should be able to make their own decisions, and so that alone makes it a little bit different. I feel like I'm unable to comment at that point.
I didn't even get into that because, like I told him, I said, that's a whole different kit and caboodle, if you want to put it that way.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But that's what I'm saying. Like I feel
I'm not
kind of
like I'm not
talking at that point. Like
right, but I'm not talking so much about is arranged marriage good or bad, okay? So because that's a whole different argument, and depending on where you come from, how you're raised, what type of religion you come from, that's a whole different thing. I'm just talking about the core and the very basic type of problem here is, do you tell someone when you go into any type of relationship, do you tell them or do you not tell them? And to me, I don't care if it's an arranged marriage, if it's a chosen marriage, even if it's a friendship. At the end of the day, it's still good to let the other person know if you're going to spend that kind of time with them. It's like being with housemates. You don't want to go and not tell them because
I get your point.
if you're walking around, so I understand that a lot of people don't want to self-identify and they don't want to tell people necessarily. And in a lot of cases, you don't. But if you're spending a lot of time around that person, it's probably a good idea to fill them in somewhat so that they have an understanding about, you may be a little slower, or you may do things a little differently, or even just some way of being able to set up your surroundings a little bit more accessible for you. And it's just, well, in my opinion, it's just core decency, I guess.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily saying that arranged marriages are good or bad. I'm just saying that I just don't understand the dynamics, so I don't feel like I would even comment. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of I feel like there's a lot of other dynamics there, and there are just things I don't understand. But it's interesting that you put it in the eyes of like even to a friend, you should tell them that you have that you're blind or whatever, because like just to give you an idea, when I started work right this summer, because it was a virtual internship, my boss did not know I was blind until I like literally showed up and he needed me to view his screen. And to me, like that, I didn't necessarily feel it to be essential to let him know because I felt that I could handle everything that he would throw at me without a problem. And that's how I see it. I feel like you should only tell someone if you essentially need to tell them because it's going to make a difference. And
agreed. But again, you were working remotely. So
yeah.
by you working remotely, you can do everything on your end. But I'm saying, like, if you were to say work with this guy that is employing you right now, but you're going into his office every day, probably be a good idea to let him know that you're visually impaired.
I would probably just show up with my dog and he would know.
Well, yeah, but
I mean,
again,
that's how I think about it, man.
I'm not saying that you necessarily have to verbally say something in that aspect, because it's pretty obvious, when you show up with your dog. But just trying to tell him about you having a visual
sign on my shirt
disability.
that says I am blind.
But I'm saying is that if you told them that, I've had employers, and I know of other people that have told them that, and when they get to work, they've already, like, the manager has done some research, found out exactly what's accessible, and created an accessible workspace for them. Or just saying, hey, you know what? I know you're coming in X amount of time. I'd like to make it accessible. What can we do to make your workstation more accessible for you? And then when you show up, it's not just a headache for everybody, because at least you've given them a heads up. And I'm not saying necessarily tell them that throughout the entire process until you get the job, because, sometimes that can be detrimental to you getting a job. But I'm just saying that it's probably a good idea before you even show up, to tell them that you do have a visual impairment. Because if you're in a cubicle farm and you're expected to go to, every cubicle is marked and you need to go to number 18, you show up going, where the heck's 18? And, so
I call Ira and ask him.
Yeah.
See, but here's an interesting point that I wanted to make once you mentioned that, because I agree with you on that. But I think there's another thing that I've heard. Now, there's this, I don't know if you've heard this, but like everyone always says that you think that everyone thinks the way you do, right? So like if you're an angry person, you feel like everyone else is also angry. If you're a happy person, then you feel like everyone is happy, right? And I've heard from other people that when you tell them when you reveal something like that, right? Like, oh, like that guy with his wife to be, right? He might say like, oh, I'm blind. She might reveal some big thing to him, right? Because people feel the need to, like, I don't know if reciprocate is the right word, but like they feel more comfortable with the idea of telling you something that's a little bit more personal when you told them something a little bit more personal.
Kind of tit for tat, yeah.
Yeah. And like, for me, that's not the case, because like I'm very reticent. And like, if you told me something personal, I would definitely be like, oh, that's horrible. Or like, oh, I'm glad you told. But I wouldn't necessarily be thinking to myself, like, I got to tell them something about me now. That's just not who I am, right?
Right.
And I feel like that, to some extent, though, makes it a little bit more persuading to go back to your original point, Lorne, to like actually tell them, because that's another reason why you should tell people. I've heard it works. I don't know. It's hard for me to comment on that one too.
But think about it this way: everything's stable. They don't know anything. He's able to drive right now for now, and you build your entire life around the ability of, okay, we're gonna have kids. You're gonna go pick up the kids for whatever reason. She may not even have her license. Well, but again, she may not even have her license, so you may have to be at that point the sole driver. Now, all of a sudden, it starts dropping and you lose your license. Then they're like, okay, wait, what? And there was this entire
You
span.
have to ride a bike, babe.
As you say,
On the
take the
pegs.
bus, not transit plus. I think that's what you always say, right?
You know about the pegs, right? On the bike?
Yeah.
Just get on the pegs, babe. You can still ride, you know? Onto my shoulder. I'll walk you with my tongue.
Yeah, no, I found
By the way,
it
have
so...
you ever done that? Like a double-sided guide where like your dog guides you and some other person?
Yeah.
Yeah, it works pretty well. I mean, he obviously isn't as like able to keep the other person safe. And I always tell them that. I'm like, hey, if you're gonna walk with me like that, you better make sure you got your hand out just in case, you know, because he's not gonna run. He's gonna run you into something. He's not gonna run me into it, but he's gonna run you into it.
Use a cane and put it to your left as far as possible. Do it that way, then you can figure it out, and then I'll be able to, you know, at least somewhat have most of the sidewalk. Or else literally stand right behind me and grab, you know, and hold on to my shoulder.
Oh, that happened. I'll tell you that. That's a funny story. we were having some fun, and we did that one time. They weren't even blind, so it tells you something. Yeah. So yeah, I do agree though. I think at first I kind of started off with this idea of like I don't even feel like competent enough to comment, and I never really tell people that I'm blind unless they really need to know. But I feel like you have a good policy there, and not to mention that there's also the fact that people generally feel more close together when they tell each other like things like that. Like, have you ever seen this little thing? There's an article from these two psychologists that in 1997 they put together, quote unquote, 36 questions to fall in love, and it's a series of questions. There's like 12 in each set. It's 3 sets of 12 questions, and they each get progressively more like close, right? So the first questions are kind of just weird, like, you know, what would you do if you met your favorite celebrity, things like that. And then they really get into closer things. I can't remember the exact like list, but the last one is essentially like, what do you look for in an ideal partner? You know, things like that, that really make you able to reveal yourself, I guess. And I think the thing that they posit is that love is essentially just you revealing yourself more and more to the other person, and then eventually you get to know each other so well that that's how you build closeness.
I can see that for a lot of the stuff, because again, you're gonna need that initial attraction, and then from there, see what type of person they are, right?
Yeah, I guess I don't know. It's definitely an interesting one because, like I said, I feel like that's my thing. I'm very reticent, so it's kind of like I don't necessarily like telling people like things about me. People, it's funny though because I'm a good listener, so people always tell me things, right? Like things that they're going through, and I listen and I give good advice, but I never feel obligated or feel like I need to tell them anything because I'm like, oh, they just told me this horrible thing about their life, or not horrible, but like, you know, crazy thing about their life. I never go, man, I should tell them something about me. I just go, oh, that's crazy. Yeah. You can trust me with all your secrets, guys.
I get that all the time. You know, it was really interesting because, like, for example, in high school, I would always get switched over with different people because we had such a small class. I graduated with 8 people and I was number 8. So we had such a small class, and before then
it was number 1.
I don't know, depends on who you want to ask. But so we got paired with each other just randomly all the time, and man, so many people kept telling me their problems, and even to this day I'm still getting people telling me their problems. And it's like, okay, well, first off, I don't really care, but I'll listen, I guess. And B, I just don't really care.
Yeah. For me, I can impart good advice because I'm that guy who always has advice for everything. Because like especially when big things happen, I always have this ego where I'm like, I can do this better than they can. Step aside, you know. Like I'd be that guy who goes up to the general and is like, General, a word with you, please. You know, like I don't understand why you're not doing this. Like it's very obvious.
It sounds like Eric Prince, who said, you know, I can do a Navy better than anybody else.
Yeah, I'd be that guy who like sees the CEO in the hallway. Excuse me, Mr. Johnson. You know, like what's up with you? I know how you
You're
can
really
lift the
messing.
stock price. You know,
You're really messing up.
right? Maybe you should just step aside and let me take over. Yeah, and I feel like I try to rein that in because it definitely is not always good because you know you jump into positions and you go like I know how to do this. I don't need to listen to this fool. And obviously, you
So,
don't.
so now the big question, which is going to lead right into tonight's topic, is Mr. Johnson a gray?
Mr. Johnson is, I can't see him, so I don't know. I don't even know if you're real, Lorne. I've never touched you. No,
Yeah,
I
you
have
have.
actually.
Yeah, you
Now that I
have.
think about it. Ladies and gentlemen, just to describe Lorne to you, he's a very fit, tall, muscular guy.
Yeah, real tall.
He's
5'7".
about
Yeah, that's real
6'7".
tall.
He weighs about 280 and he's got rock solid abs.
Well, more like 220 in a keg. But
It swings in front of him when he walks.
oh god.
No, but yeah, we had a debate actually about that back in 2017. We had a class when I was in high school called Theory of Knowledge, and it's as like hokey as you think it is, right? Just essentially sitting around talking about popular topics. There's like it's epistemology, but like at a high school level. So we talk about like, is math created or discovered by man? What is a color, right? How do we know that colors are real? That was my biggest question. Like, how do we know a color is real? And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, yeah, because I don't know anything about colors. Like, you tell me that your hair is blue, that doesn't make any sense to me versus that guy's hair is black. And they're like, oh, how do we explain it? And I was like, yeah, so does that mean colors aren't real to me? And so we had like this big discussion on it.
Well, seeing is believing, and if you can't see it, then you can't believe it.
Right. Like some people say they only believe in what they can see. So I mean, if they went blind, then it'd be over.
I believe in nothing. Nothing.
Yeah, no. So we talked a little bit about that, and that's kind of leads into tonight's topic, which is what we wanted to talk a little bit more about. And I got into this partly because of that class. I started reading and like just theorizing. We'd hold a lot of just bull sessions with people. When I participated in a couple summer programs, and I remember just having a whole table to myself of people who would come over to like debate me about this topic. It's aliens, people. We're talking about aliens, and Lorne and I are pretty much in agreement about this. I think. Would you say that, Lorne?
Yeah, I would say that we're pretty close on the same belief. Yep.
Yeah, and my biggest like argument for alien life or whatever isn't based on like obviously seeing or UFOs or any of that stuff, because frankly I don't necessarily believe a lot of it, right? If you look at like Ancient Aliens, I mean, it's a show that's I thought when I was a kid, I thought it was like the epitome of like greatness. You know what I'm talking about, Lauren?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, it's the gospel on TV.
Right, and that I'm like, but regardless, that's not really what I base it on. It's more so the ideas that logically make sense to me, right? Which is the fact that, in a galaxy that has 100 million planets, and there's 100, or it's something like 100 billion, actually, now that I think about it. In a galaxy that has 100 billion planets, and there's 100 billion galaxies in the universe, let alone the fact that there might be 100 billion universes, the idea that we are the only thing there just does not make sense to me, right? The idea that we are one in one Google, you know what a Google is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea that we are a one in one Google odds just doesn't make sense to me. The fact, I think it's more likely that there are actually probably other civilizations out there, and they're 1 million years older than us, right? Maybe, because think about it, even if they were 1,000 years older than us or 10,000 years older than us, they would probably be way more advanced than we are today. I mean, my friend mentioned it's like maybe even 100. I think 100 is a little too close, but it really shows you, because the version of us today would just be able to completely annihilate 100-year-old humans, right? Like we look at like 1900 humans, right? Just drop a nuclear bomb on them versus today. And what is the 100-year version of us going to look like? So that's kind of where I derive my belief in aliens. I think that they're probably out there, but I think that they're probably, people say like, oh, maybe they're visiting us. I don't think that they're necessarily visiting us, because I think that for us, it would be kind of like putting an iPhone into the monkey's cage, like just seeing what they do with it. They don't understand it, right? At this point, they're not evolved enough to understand the concept of what we do with this. I mean, they can obviously watch movies. Like I was just reading a story about how the monkeys are getting lonely because people aren't in the zoos anymore. So they play like Shrek movies on the iPad and stuff, and they actually just sit there watching them, and they love them. Like they think it's the best thing ever. But they don't, like, obviously I don't think that they can go, oh, I love the Shrek movie more than I like the Lion King. You know what I mean?
Oh, I really like Eddie Murphy as Donkey.
Right. They're like, oh, let's hear some of his comedy instead,
But you know what? I think something like that is very similar to, like, for example, I have an 8-month-old, and I don't think she can grasp the whole concept of, everything fancy on the TV. It's just colorful shapes, different sounds. It looks different, and it's something normal, right? So you're kind of learning and trying to interact
do that little
with
baby
something.
laugh.
She does. It's awesome. I love it. But it's the same kind of thing. But now, if you start looking at apes, for example, right? They can do braille. They can do different.
Braille? Really? I didn't know
this. Yep.
They can read braille?
Or no, not braille. Oh my God, sorry. No, sign language.
Oh, I was like, that is a weird one.
Oh, geez, sorry, no. Long day. No, ASL. Yeah, American Sign Language. It's something for a disability. No, so like they can do sign language.
You teach a monkey braille, like that's just weird to me.
That would be interesting, actually. But yeah, so they're very civilized as an animal, as the animal species. But I just want to think of it as I hope there is something, because if there isn't, and we are literally this small speck in this huge world, like huge space. No, I know, but like this huge space, we're doomed. We're doomed to fail before we even started, because I understand there's something like what 9 billion people right now, 8 or 9 billion people.
7.4, I think, or 7.5.
Is it okay? But so you start getting that size, and yeah, of course they're going to spread out, and eventually we're going to use all the resources in this world and overpopulate it, and yada yada yada. Everybody's heard the same thing. But if you don't have the ability, which we really don't, to mass move large amounts of people yet, is that I understand through like SpaceX and what's the other one? Boeing. They're working on it.
Or no, Blue Origin. That's what it's
called. But I know Boeing's in there as well, but they're behind now for a couple.
It's a partnership with like Jeff Bezos and Boeing. And
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But so I know that Elon Musk's SpaceX was successful on the Dragon capsule and all that jazz. So that's good. But I'm just saying that overall, if there's nothing else out there, it's lonely existence.
Well, I think that's another frightening concept, because it makes you wonder, like, the fact that we haven't heard anything from civilizations, maybe it's because they're like, we don't want to talk to these people, because it's like, why would you want to deal with the ants? You know what I mean? Like, think about what people do to ants. Like, if you're thinking of building a house somewhere and there's an anthill there, you don't go, oh man, the ants are going to die. Like, put something there. You just kick over the anthill and keep going on your way. Right? And it's the same way. Like, no one spends their time observing ants through a microscope, because it doesn't really matter. Like, it's such an incomprehensible thing versus looking at your own life. Maybe it's that, or maybe it's also the fact that this is, I think, an even more terrifying idea, is that we don't ever really make it past a certain point, right? Like, civilizations have all gotten to a point where they get these very, very powerful weapons, right? Like, we now have hypersonic nuclear warheads that are literally, I think, pretty much impossible to stop with current technology. Maybe we get to a point where, like, one group gets an impossible to stop technology and they go, let's use it on the other guys. And, they end up because obviously when you have technology like nuclear weapons, it usually ends up coming back on you, you know?
Yes.
And maybe like, okay, the other group goes, we can't stop it, but we can sure as heck make sure that they come with us.
Yeah.
So
I think they call that.
That's, I feel like that's how it would end, right? But I mean, that to
Yeah.
me is a more terrifying concept. The fact that there might have been hundreds, if not millions, of other civilizations, but they all reach this terminal point and they just can't go past it for whatever reason. Maybe they get hit by an asteroid, you know, and they don't evolve quick enough to get out of the way.
The Big Bang Theory.
The show?
No. The actual theory. Which actually talking about that, did you hear about what they found in a dinosaur's hip bones the other day?
I did not.
They found traces of cancer
Interesting.
in a dinosaur. Yeah, I found that so wild.
Maybe cancer killed the dinosaurs.
No.
They all just got this wild cancer that like stopped them dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The idea that, yeah, I obviously think that I think that, yeah, like you said, for our sake, I hope that there is something, and maybe that they're just not messing with us because we're literally that unimportant to them. Or maybe, I mean, maybe we're their experiment, right? Maybe we're like television, where they just watch and go, ha ha ha, look at their lives, so hilarious, you know?
Well,
Or,
if you really want to get deep, what if we're like a Sims game?
yeah, I mean, maybe somebody's going, let's see what happens when I push this button on the Carlos character, you know? Like, oh, he just punched himself, you know? Like, why did I just punch myself?
Or maybe
Yeah.
they know that we're going to have guaranteed annihilation as it is. So you're just going to kill each other off anyway. So why would we interfere? We'll just wait till they're done and we'll just come in and pick up the pieces afterwards.
But realistically, that's the thing that I think people don't understand, is that there really is nothing here that's special. There isn't, right? There's water. There's everything that's on Earth is on asteroids somewhere. And you would think that a society that knows that we're here and is smart enough to conceal itself, or maybe they're so far away but they can still see us somehow, I feel like they can go mine an asteroid for everything they need, right? They wouldn't need to come to Earth to get anything.
But what if it was the exact, because like, for example, for us, right? If we were to go and expand the population, we're not going to go live on an asteroid because it's not going to have the same thing. Now, if this civilization is very similar to us, you know, and they breathe either carbon dioxide or, you know, oxygen, for example, and they live on a planet that's still very similar to ours, well, ours is starting to look very inviting then, right? Because they may be able to find it, but they just may need the space.
If you have the technology to stay hidden like that and be so far away and all that, I feel like there are closer planets nearby that are just perfect candidates, right? Like, why go that far? You know what I mean?
Who knows?
Like,
they even may be, you know, in the galaxy next to us, or
well, that's still quite a distance, something, bro. That's not like the house next door.
No, it is, but if you believe in some of the reports that people are saying, where, you know, they can go light years fast, right, and they can go quote unquote warp speed and all this other stuff, yes, that's not that far for them.
No, and I get it, but that's what I'm saying. Why would you go because think about it from a human standpoint, right? If there is a city next door that is good for your house for living, and you know it's got everything that you need, but there's also a house next door that's got everything you need. Wouldn't you just want to move next door versus move entire cities and uproot your life? It's better to just move next door. And that's what I'm saying, that there's got to be other close planets.
Well, think about it. How often people go and transplant into different countries or even to different cities due to work or due to, you know, lifestyle choices. You know, if you have a job in another city or you have the ability, well, A, why can't you find a job in that same city? And B, you're not going to move next door if you get a job in another city. And if you're running out of room,
that's not the same. That's not the same.
No.
Getting a job in another city is not like coming to Earth.
Well, no. But think about it this way, though: is that if you are getting to the constraints of the planet you're on, mm-hmm, you can't just move next door. You can't necessarily do that because, like, for example, for us, we can't just move next door
Well,
because you would
I'm
need to
speaking
have
in
a lot of
relative
technology.
terms. I'm
No, no,
speaking.
no. I understand that, but again, I'm saying is that if they can move light years away and they can go so fast in a certain amount of time, then inhabiting a planet like ours wouldn't be too much or too difficult for them.
Yeah, but okay. Here's my thing, right? We know that they're not within a couple hundred light years per se, right? We know that. Hold on, give me 1 second. Okay, we know that these aliens, these beings, are not within like, okay, we can just a couple hundred light years. The fact that that would be a jaunt if they can travel at like light years per second or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that they're probably 4,000 or 5,000 light years away. And if you're that far, think about the diameter of that circle, right? There's got to be other planets that are far closer to you that are just as perfect for terraforming. Because if they were that close that we were perfect for terraforming for them, we would know them. We would, unless they're like some fourth dimensional beings that we can't understand. At which point, I feel like they're not really going to be interested in our planet either, because it just doesn't suit them. You get what I'm saying?
They just want the humans for slaves.
But again, if you're so powerful, that's the thing. If you're so powerful that you can travel at light speed, I'm sure that you can create machines that are far more efficient than any human. I mean, we've done it, right? We don't use mules anymore because we found cars, right? We're replacing humans at a warp speed at this point. We're developing AI that's going to replace everyone at some point. And
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think that's going to happen. I feel like it's going to uproot our system, but regardless, that's a different conversation.
The beginning of the end.
Why? Well, there's a guy. Do you know KNFB Reader? What else is developed by this guy? A couple of different synthesizers. Ray Kurzweil.
Yeah, you're talking about Ray Kurzweil. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a huge futurist, and he believes in this concept called the singularity, where humans and computers will just merge. I'd really like to meet this guy. I feel like he's an interesting character.
Oh,
and obviously,
if you listen to his TED Talks, he's definitely an interesting character.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
In a good way or interesting way?
I would say interesting. Absolutely interesting. But again, when you're talking to someone that has that type of vision, it's absolutely, he's definitely going to be a little different.
Like, well, this is interesting too, because I used to be like a big anti-Elon Musk guy. Like, I was like, man, this guy, why are people into this guy? He seems like just another, smooth talker. And then I listened to a little bit of what he said, and I'm like, okay, he's not exactly a smooth talker. Like, one of the things he said that I thought was funny was he said that some people were talking about his stock price, right, on the earnings call. And they were asking him a question. He goes, yeah, that's like not cool. Like, that was not a cool question, man. I'm like, I was like, all right, that's not a smooth talker. A smooth talker would have like convinced you that what you were saying was wrong, not gone, yeah, that's uncool.
Yeah, he's definitely not silver-tongued, let's put it that way.
Yes, yeah, and so, but again, right, I feel like that's the thing with Elon Musk. He just has so many visions of things to do, and to a lot of people, he probably sounds crazy because so much of what he's proposing is just, it sounds ridiculous to our ears, but it's interesting, right? Because too often the geniuses of yesteryear are the, what do you call it? The insane people of yesteryear are the geniuses of today, but the insane people of yesteryear could also just be the insane people of yesteryear today, There are definitely your fair share of people who in 1970 were saying some crazy stuff and they're saying it today and, none of it is true. But yeah, back to this aliens thing. I do think that, I feel like there's really nothing that we would really get out of them or that they would get out of us. And I just feel like they're probably within a couple thousand light years from us. And like I said, there's a couple of ideas, right? Maybe they're behind us. They're still going through like an evolution stage. Maybe they're like in their Roman era stage, where they're still fighting with swords and stuff. Maybe they're, a million years ahead of us and they know how to develop like technology that literally moves them like at 20 light years per second or something, right? Something ridiculous like that. Like, just imagine. I mean, the fact is, they could have technology at this point that is literally requires no type of thrust back. What do they call it? When how all technology we have now literally creates force forward by pushing back, right? Like a rocket, jet, all of it creates forward motion by pushing backwards. they could have something that literally just moves. Like it just somehow just moves without any kind of effort, without any kind of pushback. So,
Well, yeah, because everything that has a reaction,
has an
what's
equal
that
and
term?
opposite reaction.
Yeah, exactly. But if you listen to some of the people that have supposedly seen UFOs, they say that there's really nothing. It just shows up and then it's gone. And who knows? Like there's so much technology, but if you even just look at something, if you talk to them or if you listen to some of the people that are really into this, they'll say, it's not so much there, but they understand teleportation, they understand telekinesis. They don't talk specifically with words, they talk about it with just using
Thoughts.
minds. Yeah, exactly.
Well, think about how
And
cool that would be. But again, here's the thing, though. I don't think that that's going to be as easy as we think, because I still feel like, well, maybe we'll develop a universal language, but I feel like, me knowing Spanish and English, I definitely can think differently in Spanish and English. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the same thoughts.
mm-hmm.
They are the same meaning, but they're like the words are obviously not the same, right? Like I can think a thought in Spanish, and it's different wording. But regardless, I feel like at that point you develop some kind of universal language that everyone just knows, and it would just get rid of all other languages, unfortunately. But anyways, yeah, that's probably what it is. I mean, like I said, imagine if they're a million years ahead of us, right? They could literally be so advanced that we can't even comprehend them at this point. We would be like ants to them. They just don't care. Now,
Yeah.
here's another question. Would they become gods? Because that's kind of what people think God is, right? And if they, just like, I know that at first the natives thought Christopher Columbus was a god, right? If they landed, would people think that that's God? I mean, that's kind of the posit behind Ancient Aliens. Some of the episodes kind of dealt with that. Where like, was God really an alien?
Well, yeah, and there are pictures of aliens and beings and UFOs or flying saucers or flying craft in hieroglyphics. So
Yeah.
it's not something that was new for a thought by any means, but they considered them to be gods back then.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's because I always thought that, like, I mean, there's another hypothesis that gods came out of like drugs, right? Like hallucinogenics. I've never done hallucinogenics, but I know that from reading accounts, like they can make some very crazy things happen to you. And like, imagine, you're older guy in the, 10,000 years ago, you go, huh, this plant looks interesting. Let's try it. I mean, at some point, everything had to be like that, right? Like, who was the guy who went, this thing just popped out of this chicken. Let me crack it and see what happens. So I'm sure that at that point it could happen. So maybe somebody ate some kind of bush and went, wow, I saw God, and in reality they just were tripping.
Yeah, it's really interesting because if you look at things that are just, I guess, man-made per se, Scientology is a perfect one, right? Where it was just one guy made up a bunch of stuff, and there's now everybody's paying tens of thousands of dollars to get, what is it, thetas or whatever out of them or something like that, and they've got like this thetans. There you go. Yeah. So
don't criticize them more. They've got a long reach, and I'm sure that they'll be listening to the Blind Banter podcast and going, "We've got to get these guys."
Well, you know what? Come talk to me and tell me where I'm wrong. I don't want to go to a seminar,
bro. They'll be like an Ottawa man named disappeared yesterday. His wife has no idea where he went.
Well, I'm just glad I'm paid up on my life insurance. But no, like I don't want to go to
years, bro. That's not good.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll come out a changed man. But no, so like you've got so many different types of beliefs and everything, and we at one time thought that there was 100 different gods, and looking back on the Romans and on the Greeks, and looking at all of these types of gods, nowadays we go, wow, they were crazy. But we've just literally taken all those gods and switched it down to one or two or however many that
Well,
certain people do. But it's again, the whole religion thing is, it comes down to faith. And that's exactly what it is how much faith are you going to put into something. And that's the same thing I find, especially with like extraterrestrials and UFOs. But when you have people like Paul Hellyer, who is Canada's former defense minister, coming out and going in front of Parliament and saying, I was looking at a lot of the classified documentation, and there is definitely something out there. And if he doesn't have a clue about some of the things that are happening in Canada's airspace, well, you would think that he would know something.
well, the military definitely hasn't. I mean, anytime there's some kind of weird flying thing, right? You want to investigate it. I mean, if you're the military, because you don't know what it is. And so I know that the Pentagon has come out and investigated it, and they've kind of like said that they have been investigating UFOs for the last couple of years. So I definitely think that there's probably and there's a really really interesting thing where and it could just be like craziness, but there's a have you seen this interview? I saw a little clip of it where Trump Jr. is talking to Trump, and he's like, "What do you know about UFOs?" And Trump's like, "We know some very interesting things. I don't want to say anything else, but we know some very interesting things, and I haven't yet decided if we're going to talk about them, but we might." And Donald Jr. is like, "Wow, really?" Like he's all excited, like little kid, Yeah, it's a little clip I got, but it was just interesting because I heard about that. I don't remember. I think one of my friends told me, like, "Did you hear what Trump?" And I was like, "No." And then I like looked it up, like 30-second clip, and yeah, it was definitely interesting. Now, Trump could also just be, saying stuff because he definitely does that, but definitely makes you think a little bit, especially because the president is definitely getting briefings if we know about this. You can guarantee that the president is getting briefings about the mysterious things in their airspace and what.
Or
what
if
are
you
we gonna do
believe
about
that there's the tall grays working in the Pentagon, he may even just have already met them.
Maybe. I feel like he would say something though. They wouldn't introduce him to that. But yeah, it's one of the things I want to tell you about. Well, this would be a whole nother podcast, but I feel like personally, I mean, my theory is that gods have not necessarily gone away. We've just replaced them with things, and we don't call them God per se in the same way that we do, like, the big God in the Bible or the gods like the Romans or the Egyptians had or whatever. But we still have gods, and I mean, I feel like how are we on time, Lauren? Because
We're
that's
good. Keep going.
yeah, well, okay, all right. I'll elucidate a little here. I feel like we've replaced a lot of our gods with just worldly things, right? Our gods are now the people we see on television. In some cases, politicians. For some people, in some countries, politicians are definitely treated as God would be treated. Definitely, it could be. I mean, our phones. Look at how much reverence people have for their phone. And now that could just be addiction. But it's incredible how, and I'm guilty of this, right? Lauren, be honest with me. How long could you go without your phone if I just took it from you? How long until you went, "Oh my God, I need to see this. I need to see this, man. I'll do anything. I'll give you all my money. I'll sign over my house."
Probably 4 or 5 days, probably.
Exactly, right? Like, if they took it from you, like I feel like for me, the first 1 or 2 days, I'd be like, "It's all right. I'm all right. I'm all right." And then the third day, I'd be like pounding the walls for lack of anything better to do, but I'd be like, "I'm still good. I'm still good." Then the fourth day, I'd be thinking about it, like, maybe I should just give this guy all my money. But then I'm like, "No, man, I'm stronger than that." And like by day 7, I'd definitely be like, "Man, just here's my bank account. Just take it." Yeah, and to me, like, that kind of shows you how much reverence we have for these things. And I mean, not to mention how much reverence we have for just celebrities. I think that one's an interesting one because they're people. I mean, yes, athletes are different types of people, right? Like, they're genetically in a lot of ways superior. Like I can't jump as high as LeBron, and I'm blind, but I feel like I don't look anything like him. So
he's a little taller than you are.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, really? I thought he was just as short as I am. Wasn't he?
He's a really good jumper.
Right. That's why they told me I could be anything I wanted, and I said I want to be in the NBA.
Well, like R. Kelly says, he believes you can fly.
Yeah. So yeah, but I feel like we've just replaced a lot of what we have, and even theories now. For some people, they worship, like for a while I worshipped economics as much as I would worship a god, right? Like I looked at everything through that lens and was like, no, you're wrong. You're a Keynesian economist. You're a terrible person. And I've learned to like get away from that because everything is so evolving. But it takes a lot of introspection, and I think that's the most important thing, is to look into your life and think about, what am I holding up as a god that maybe I shouldn't? What am I looking at with so much reverence and thinking like it can tell no lies, and maybe going, everything is fickle in this life, and what can tell no lies is probably telling lies.
Yeah, it's you can really go down this rabbit hole for so long, and it's it's deeper than I can fathom, and I think it's probably deeper than many people can fathom, and I don't think anybody's been able to fully crack it, obviously.
Oh no.
But it's definitely something very interesting to think about, for sure.
Yeah. I've heard, and I hope this is true, that in the next 100 years that we will be able to make contact with like alien life forms and stuff. And I mean, it'll radically reshape the world if you think about it, right? Like the idea that there is life on other planets. Even if we found microbes on Mars, that would reshape the world, right? Let alone intelligent life. It's incredible. Or even if you found a trace of microbes on Mars.
They did.
They did?
They did. Yeah, they found they've found that there was water and life on a cellular level on Mars. So at one point there was some form of life on Mars.
It's funny because I watched this documentary called When Aliens Attack, and it was all about Mars. Like it had nothing to do. I mean, they had a couple of scenes on what would happen if aliens attacked, but most of it was on life on Mars and like the evidence that they found for it. And I was like, this should have been called Life on Mars instead of When Aliens Attack.
Well, they had a movie about that, right? Literally called Mars Attacks.
Maybe that was it. I don't know, but yeah, it was definitely not what I was looking for. I was looking for like action and like fighting and craziness, and instead it was like just a little bit of action. And
so you definitely want to watch then Mars Attacks. That's literally what it's called.
Okay, I will look into it then. Mars Attacks.
It's horribly brutal. Like it's an actually brutal movie in regards to this. Just the whole quality is definitely not there, but it's definitely a cult classic. It's very similar to the. Do you remember the movie The Room?
No. Room and Board?
No.
Guys,
so
Lorne thinks it's Board and Room, and I think it's Room and Board, and I'm right. It's like, you pay for board and room. I'm like, what is he talking about? A board with a room in it? Like a room with a board in it?
No, so we were talking about it, and yes, okay, it's been a very long day. Board and room, room and board. I'm bored in my room while you're giving me board and room. So either way, it doesn't matter, tomato, tomato. If you're gonna start, making fun of little things, well, everybody has Canadianisms.
What else did I make fun of you for today? It was there was another thing that you said. Severity. It's severity, bro. Okay, yeah. As you can tell, I can be an interesting person sometimes. I have those little pet peeves, where people say things and I'm like, I gotta say something. That's what I'm saying. I'd be that guy who goes, "Excuse me, Mr. Johnson." Like I would totally be that guy.
So
And,
everybody, let's wait till Carlos has a child, runs you absolutely ragged, where you're half asleep. You come online and you say a couple words just wrong because all you want to do is sleep. And then he's like, rah, 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 rah. Anybody that has kids is going to know those exact types of feelings where you're like, oh, I just want to go to sleep. I just want to relax.
Is that a challenge, Lorne? Because I'll have a child just to show you. I'll have a child right now just to show you that I can handle it. Give me, what is it? What would it be? A little over 9 months.
Well, because if you look at the root word, it's severe.
Yes.
End of story. Severity.
But we don't drive on
severity.
the parkway. No. What is it?
Really
we don't park on the drive. We park on the driveway and drive on the parkway. It doesn't always make sense the way we speak English. Okay.
Well, you know what? If you really want to go down this road, pardon the pun, you don't drive at all. So of course you don't. Okay.
No, you said if you really want to go down this parkway.
If you really want to go down this driveway, you're gonna find my car.
Yeah. This is interesting one. We went from aliens to parkways. maybe a UFO would land on a parkway.
Well, in a lot of movies, you know, what was it, like the Battle of Los Angeles or something, I think it was called. There was literally a UFO that landed in like the middle of one of the freeways. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. For the next episode, I'm going to focus on having a child, and what else? I want to prove you wrong, Lorne. I'm going to set a reminder in my phone for 10 years from now.
How about this? Everybody that knows parents that are, new parents that are in that time frame, let's say 4 months to 10 months. Email us at blindbanter@gmail.com or leave a review in the iTunes comments or now on the TuneIn Radio comments, and let us know if you have those days where you just get run ragged, where sometimes words don't quite come out the way you want to, and at the end of the day, you just don't really care. Or you know what? How about Twitter us and tweet us? There we go. At the Real Blind Banter, or Facebook at Blind Banter Podcast, and Instagram at The Real Blind Banter as well. And let us know exactly what you think, because I know for a fact I'm not the only one here.
All right. Thanks for your graceful what would you even call this? This is not an extroduction, because you know how the beginning is an introduction. What would you call this?
Oh, here he starts.
All right, let's just do this before we get into another one.
This is our exit speech.
Okay, yeah, there we go. This is our extroduction.
All right, guys. Until next week, we'll talk to you later. Stay safe.